Life's good. Thank you, sir. All right, Letitia, would you start us off? So this is Group B. Have you introduced the group? Thank you. Aha. And there's now a protector for falling off the side of the... the little velvet curtains.
Alrighty, the 2-minute challenge. So Kyle and I are representing, we were kind of like a funders group with aligning the support for funders. And we had 6 faithful participants over the last 2 days, which I just want to quickly acknowledge you for your commitment and your time in working with us this week and appreciate the conversations and value you added. So we had Karen from Digital Promise, we had Art from Albany, New York, Caitlin from AACTE, Kelly from the McConnell Foundation, Larry from New Jersey, or NJ Edge, and of course, Bob sat with us. So we do appreciate you allowing us to facilitate this session this year. So what we did in our session today is yesterday we talked about challenges and 2 important areas around those challenges. So today we wanted to turn these into concrete strategies so that they have some meaningful next action steps. So in order to do that, we focused on our very first challenge that we presented yesterday around the communication piece. And so with the communication piece, we first wanted to be clearer on what goals do we want to accomplish with this communication so we can be more directed on what we're working on. And so when we thought about this communication piece, we found that it's important to develop this communication that will inspire, visualize, and incentivize specific actions for funders, anchor groups, that will inspire them towards more innovative thinking and collective action. So we first defined what is it we want to do with this communication tool. After we talked about the goals and what do we want to do with it, we then went to how do we want to accomplish this? And the how to accomplish this, the big how and the end product that we felt is important is to create a funder's guide, a toolkit that would merge the practices of bankers, the needs and practices of education stakeholders. Like, how do we develop this toolkit that brings all of that together, that's focused on the CRA investments, the CRA compliance? And so this communication tool would be focused toward these groups to help them inspire those other actions. So with this funders and toolkit, this funders guide and toolkit, we talked about the how and some things that needed to be included. Then we talked about the who. Who needs to help us create this funders guide toolkit so that it's effective to reach multiple audiences, again, to accomplish our big goal of inspiration and visualization. And so with our who's, we talked, of course, about funders, but also about, the education innovation cluster, the need to hire someone for the research and the funding. And of all this, we found that it's important for our funders guide toolkit to really focus on the framing of it. There's so much information out there, so many other toolkits, but if we could be more specific with this toolkit that is directed to the merge of the banking industry and the banker industry and the educational systems, that we could get further ahead with this education and economic inclusion gap or inequities. And so our first, the one challenge yesterday and our one big takeaway next step today is to begin the work on this Funders Guide Toolkit.
Thanks very much, Letitia and Kyle. Okay, so the next group that also has to leave pretty soon for the airport is Group E. And so that's Joyce and Rick and Ravi, I believe. Come on up. Thank you.
Life is good. On behalf of our group, if the group can kind of wave your hands in the air, because we do care, okay? I would like to present my two colleagues, And we have in hand a 5-page document gathered from all of the notes and conversations from yesterday and trying to put this in perspective. So, Joyce, please.
No worries, I won't present all 5 pages. I saw the concerns. Yesterday, we met as a group, and our goal for our group was to look for strategies to improve collaboration among resource providers by developing strategies for bundling broadband, digital content, tech and librarian support, refurbished and new devices and skills, and training for living wage careers. The objective was to make strategy recommendations to enhance education and outreach around broadband issues, what effective partnerships look like, and what policy innovations can make a difference in promoting and furthering existing digital inclusion strategies. So as a result of those conversations, we came up with a 3-pronged pyramid or 3-legged stool that serves as a conceptual framework for systematic strategy for an online digital inclusion hub that would be a smart hub. Why is it smart? It's smart because the 3 levels that we see in terms of the legs would be, number 1, outreach and education. That would be a primary focus of the hub. The second would be a policy hub within that hub that would focus on federal, state, and local policies as it relates to legislation that affects digital inclusion. And then the last leg is that of a partnership part that would serve as a lifeline to enroll consumers or those that we serve. To connect the previous and ongoing efforts to advance digital inclusion aim to address the following issues. All 3 of those legs would be addressing 3 major issues that we see that need to be bundled: affordability, access, and adoption issues that our clientele face. So at the state level, the hub would be further broken down into local government, community, profit and nonprofit organizations, individual citizens, and professional experts, communication systems that would be able to share information either in a synchronous or asynchronous format. And so now how we would do that is going to be covered by my colleague.
So one of the things that we were struggling with was how do we keep this going forward once we leave, right? Everybody goes home and like, that was great, but now what? So we decided we would create a community platform or place where we could go and share and disseminate ideas as well as answer and ask questions, that sort of thing. And so we are going to use a platform called Basecamp. And so we're going to use that and see how that goes and be able to share ideas and things like that. Because that was one of the things that kind of surfaced was, well, I didn't know that was available, or wow, you had that, we didn't know. And so here's a place where people can go and kind of get quick information. Now this isn't closed just to us, so if you're interested in knowing what we're doing on the resource provider side, just see me at the table before you leave and I'll get you added to that group. You don't have to contribute anything if you just want to keep your ear to the ground on what's going on. But if you want to contribute, you're more than welcome to. If you know of something that we all should be aware of, please don't hesitate to put that in there. And then secondly, we wanted to also stay in touch, like maybe on a monthly basis, have an online meeting where we share like what is going on around the country. We've got folks in our group that are doing Wi-Fi networks on buses in Michigan, rural areas, and Robbie's talking about working with the HBCUs, and there's some areas where they don't have internet access, so now we can marry those 2 groups together and share best case scenarios and stories to inspire more buy-in from our constituencies and for funding. So it's one of the things that we're really excited about and looking forward to, and if you want to be a part of it, don't hesitate to let us know. Thank you guys.
Yes, and we will end by saying we need a champion. More than a volunteer. So, Bob? Yes. No, I'm not. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Oh, that was fun. Very sweet. That's awesome. All right, so why don't we, so we've had groups E and B. How about we go to A now? Is that Paul and Tara, I think? Thank you. This is great.
Okay, our group, as you heard, is focused on research and evaluation. We're not going to indicate the questions that were posed to us because Bob wrote them and it would take 5 minutes just to read the questions.
I resemble that remark.
So basically we came up with really recommendations in terms of the ways that research and evaluation can enhance the visibility and the sharing of information resources more broadly. And so one of our first recommendations is that, first of all, that research and evaluation should be considered CRA-worthy investments, by the banks, and that we really need to develop metrics and benchmarks to assess impact of CRA investments in LMI communities. And one of the things that would be really helpful related to that is, developing asset mapping, so to identify opportunities, and not just in terms of the technical aspects, but looking at social determinants of health, educational opportunities, small business creation, and resiliency pre-gentrification, as opposed to simply the engineering technological innovations. We think that what also would be very helpful is funding long-term case studies in terms of these CRA investments to really try to understand the factors that contribute to success. And really, some of these investments, it may take several years before we can really surface and see what the effects are, what the impact is, for example, on high school graduation rates, wealth creation, and so forth. Second area is the need for sharing of research information about CRA investments. And so recommendation is that we have publications of CRA investment practices, but in harvestable formats. As we heard yesterday, different agencies have different formats for reporting requirements, and if we could get concurrence and have formats that are consistent, then we can really use that to start integrating that, aggregating it, and start building a knowledge base of effective strategies for community impact. And our, whoops, now the screen has disappeared. No, there it is. Yeah, here, the other aspect that we thought would be really important is thinking about, when we're thinking about research of CRA investments, that we think of a three-pronged relationship matrix where we have the banks, the community and municipality as the second part, but the third part is the university, and they should be working closely together to facilitate research and evaluation of CRA investments. And we would think that the universities, in this instance, could waive the indirect costs, for whatever CRA funding is made for the research and evaluation to have greater value in terms of those investments. And I think it's also important when we're having the universities working with the communities and the banks, that the design of research would really engage all three of them together in the design and the implementation of the research studies, and really focusing on two areas. One is digital equity, and the other is economic inclusion. And lastly, in terms of recommendations for what the National Collaborative for Digital Equity might do is, and that includes all of us here, is that we take a greater role for advocacy and increasing awareness for the need for research and evaluation of impact of CRA investments. That together we encourage federal funding of studies of impact related to digital equity and economic inclusion. And our last one is that we really leverage land-grant university mission to include dissemination of digital equity, effective practices, and really kind of taking the agricultural extension model, which is part of the land-grant university, and extending that model into this whole area of digital equity and economic inclusion. So that's ours.
Thank you. Tempting fate did not use the stairs, I've been told, in terms of falling off the stage. So Joe, for statewide, statewide strategies? Thank you.
Morning, everybody. I want to say thank you to my group members for collaborating with me the past couple of days, and also voluntolding me to be the guy to write all this down and to come up here and share it with you folks. So thank you again. So our charge was to look at state-level initiatives, okay? And in fact, we kind of focused that more today towards looking at setting up for state-level summits on CRA, and how that would look. What would be the foundation for that? How would we help set it up? What would be the tools and the things that were needed to make that happen? So we started with the need for a toolkit. That's something I've been hearing from the other reporters here today, where a toolkit on the basics of CRA, and really kind of keep that high level. That was something we focused on because we don't want to choke our target audience right off the bat. What is it? Who holds the keys? What types of projects and initiatives are eligible? And we've got those information in various points. It's a need to synthesize, including case studies, related success stories. Our presentation this morning from Jeannie Milliken Bonds had some great resources in that we could absolutely include in that toolkit. Also an explanation of the why. Why is CRA important to communities and other anchor institutions? Digital literacy leading to engaged and employed and active citizenry. You talk about the benefits to the community, and that helps foster more of a buy-in from those folks. It's also understanding that CRA doesn't belong just to us. This is something that we're focusing on at this summit, but there are other agencies, other alliances and associations doing similar work. So we want to to not duplicate efforts and to share efforts as much as we can. Helpful links included in that. Bob has a great CRA grant-making guide, links to other similar groups, as I've alluded to, and also kind of a media briefing, something that you could hand out as a primer to members of the media who also don't know what CRA is or how it works. Targeted groups for that list would include, and this is not exhaustive, but seniors, tribal entities, schools and libraries, municipalities, nonprofit groups within them, and what would really be wonderful, we identified, was a kind of a state-by-state listing, a directory of sorts, where we would have folks that have expertise in these various sections and various complicated issue points that you could turn to in a pinch and say, can you help me out with this? And that would be a real aid to all of us here, to have a repository of folks we can go to in a pinch. So we have this foundation we set with the toolkit. What does that lead to? We'd like to see ambassadors, champions as we talk about. So training of individuals to aid regional, state, and local folks with the information around CRA. So what does that look like? Again, we have other agencies that can help us with this. CETA has been identified as one. Possible state-level trainings hosted by state individuals to inform CRA in individual cities, areas, regions, what have you, and having NCDE partner with CETA perhaps to train those individuals. So what does staffing them look like? And what does sustainability look like in that regard? Probably starts out with volunteers. It would probably, if we want to make sure this is sustainable, we'd have to move to paid positions in some way, shape, or form. And I would guess that would be a joint venture with NCDE and other partners. I mean, you get what you pay for eventually. We've all got very busy schedules, and to just expect folks to do this on the side could be very detrimental in the end. But convening a group to talk about what a job description for this position would look like, I think would be very beneficial. It's something we talked about a lot in our group. So what does the perfect ambassador look like? Phenomenal communication skills. This is a very complicated issue that's pretty hard to explain to laymen, as it were. So understanding exactly how it works, but also how to communicate that to varying audiences is very important. And having a banking and, of course, capital finance background for that person is also paramount. Target audiences, again, this varies by region, state, locality, but state and local governments, school administrators, housing authorities, community organizations, and the vendor community we also identified as a possible point to leverage this information and to really get in the community using those vendors as a guide, saying this is another way that you can do more in these areas using these funds, make the dollar go farther. So what would we need for state-level summits? Well, we need a dedicated planning group. Bob, you'll be happy to note that they told me you can turn something like this around in about 6 months. But finding that budget, finding partners, finding people who would sponsor, but also state buy-in. Having states take ownership of this, what does that look like at the state level? For my state personally in Michigan, we kind of threw out, we have an economic development arm, we have, of course, the Department of Education, we have our technology management and budget folks who focus on technology, human services, who are on the ground and social work in these cities and communities doing the work, and other partnerships that we haven't thought of yet. But those are the people that we think would be the start of nailing something like this down at a state level. So convening a dedicated planning group to identify a budget and then identify partnerships at the state level to make that happen.
Let's hear it for voluntelling. That was awesome. Okay, so let's see. We've now got Beth and Ross with Group D, as in David, Group D as in Delta. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Oh, we're just fine. I wasn't voluntold, I was just told. I'm Beth Holland from COSIN, and I had the privilege of working with a great group over the last 2 days to talk about the role of librarians and libraries and technologists in really addressing challenges of digital equity. And I think if I could sum up what we really accomplished in the last a day and a half, I think we started a little bit with solutionitis, and then we backed up to really deeply trying to understand problem and context. And so I'll admit this one was mine versus the group, but it's something that I've been wrestling with is if digital equity is the solution, what's the problem it's trying to solve? And so we really came at it from this challenge that we refined this morning of our goal is to build the capacity of librarians and technologists to serve the specific needs of a diverse LMI learning communities, not just the learners, but the communities themselves, to attain digital equity and economic inclusion. And we found that there was a really critical point of being able to meet the specific needs of the community, and that we had to make sure that we were coming in and meeting people where they were, and that we wanted to take a real systemic approach to engaging in sustained cycles of inquiry to identify and provide services and support that foster the capacity of human agency. And Ross really defined human agency, talking about intellectual agency, social agency, cultural agency, political agency, economic agency, and that it really was an all-encompassing piece. So here's what we're going to do about it. So the first thing that we said is we really had to make sure that we were deeply identifying and understanding the needs of the LMI learner, but also the culture and the context. Recognizing that there is no silver bullet, one solution isn't going to fit all communities, and so we had to go through a systemic process of engaging all the community stakeholders to really understand that reality that was in place. The next thing we were going to do is engage in short cycles of inquiry, because we realized instead of just coming almost from a position of power and saying, this is what we're going to do, we now have 3 Ps. In education, they have Cs, and we now have Ps. And our Ps, we were going to do pop-ups, prototypes, and pilots with the goal of data-driven proof of concept. And so through that, we were going to make sure that we were really engaging community funders, community partners. We wanted to ultimately design a getting started program that would lead to an impact evaluation, and then ongoing evaluation, revision, and extension. And so in terms of how we're going to do this, we should have invited the research group to just come join us. We talked about research practice partnerships. How do we really do a needs assessment? How do we take this idea of pop-ups and pilots and building maps of community support to really understand what was going on? And a few concrete examples we talked about with this pop-ups and maps. Google has their rolling study hall program. Omaha has a mobile learning unit. These ideas of how can we make like a pop-up fab lab. MIT has done that as well. We looked at Beaverton Public School Districts, who's made community maps where students know that this is where they can go to get hotspots or Wi-Fi or extra support. And what we really wanted to focus on was this idea of equitable access and making sure that it wasn't, I forgot what our fancy word was, but essentially it wasn't giving hand-me-downs out. It wasn't just about providing refurbished devices or some form of a hotspot access, but it was really about thinking through how do we create equity. And so the big stakeholders we realized is that it has to be a community effort. And so it's librarians, it's public education, it's school boards and superintendents and higher education. We also got down to thinking about civic leaders, the mayor's office, fire and police departments, religious affiliation groups, but really thinking about, parents and students. We had to keep reminding ourselves this, wait, we have to go back to the source and they need to be included in this solution. And eventually, yes, we do need funders, banks, and philanthropies. And so I think what we've really gotten to a point of understanding is that we need to think through if we're going to build this ongoing digital literacy and capacity towards economic inclusion, then it needs to be a community effort, and it needs to be an effort designed to meet the specific needs of the community. So, thanks.
These are awesome. So I believe Sarah is going to be doing Group F for us. Thank you. This is great.
Hello, I'm Sarah Hannawald from the One-to-One Institute, and I represent the intellectual powerhouse that is Group F. And So I'm a former English school teacher, so I wanted to tell you that we had to talk for a little bit before we found our thesis. But the good news is we found it, and it was first said in 2010 by the National Broadband Plan, which is, like electricity a century ago, broadband is a foundation for economic growth, job creation, global competitiveness, and a better way of life. And so we wanted to start with the why. So the why is there, it's encaptured very well, and we believe that the National Collaborative for Digital Equity becomes a lighthouse organization, which means serving as a guide, a clearinghouse, and a digital coffee shop for all members of the community, educators, bankers, students, policymakers. Every one of these groups needs to understand the why of why digital equity is good for each one of them. So as part of that, Bob, do you have a good suitcase?
I think so.
Okay, good, because we are sending you on a tour, and intellectual powerhouse group, yes. Fabulous sketch artists, not so much. I twisted some arms, but we've got you a ticket for all 50 states. Some of them you're going to need multiple stops in, but we think that some other groups called it a champion, but that charismatic leader who can deliver with passion this call for action that inspires others. That's an essential piece. Because we know we need to build capacity throughout our communities for this kind of relationship. So we want to turn the joint statement into a resolution that serves as both a vision and a call for action. So we would like for this group to issue that. So building leadership capacity on the educator side is also going to be essential for this, and we've heard other groups call for a guidebook. We want to build capacity from understanding the big picture and the opportunity landscape to the nitty-gritty of what worked. Some examples, here's what I did in my community, and here's what you can do in yours. We know that a leader's playbook needs to be one that understands that cultures and communities will need some different approaches. And we would like to consider an innovative approach, such as incorporating visual literacy and building out some tools that are not maybe your typical white paper video type playbook. So thank you.
Well, this ought to be easy to synthesize, right? Wow, what a rich agenda, extraordinarily rich agenda. What a privilege and an honor to be a participant in this room with such heart and soul and mind all working on this together. Let me just, I don't think we need the screen here. Just shut that down. Wow. What it strikes me about the recommendations of each of the work groups is how doable they are. They're bold, but I think each of them is achievable. Do you agree? I mean, I don't think there's anything too wild and crazy, but there's a lot of fun in there. I mean, some themes, but let me just open it up right now first, and then we'll talk about next steps, and then we want to turn it over, John, to you and your colleagues with Shelby and Dr. Katz around the EBS press conference. So we'll turn that over right at 12:15, so we'll make sure we're on the dot for the live stream. But just any overall reactions in the room to what you've heard from the other work groups. And let me, I'll do the Phil Donahue thing again. I'll run around with a microphone. Any comments about this, Sarah?
Only because I feel this may have gotten buried a little bit, but how does this group feel about turning a joint statement into a resolution and a call for action as a result of this conference?
Other comments, questions, insights? Robbie, I'll bring this to you. Thank you.
From all of the groups, we need a champion. Okay, I know we're streaming. We need a champion, Bob. And on behalf of your passion and dedication, knowledge and skills, more than a volunteer, we need a strategic champion, paid.
This is a radical thinking group. Some other thoughts? Wendy?
I have nothing to compare this to because I wasn't here last year, but I think what I like that came out of the groups I heard was that there are actionable steps to take, which is always wonderful leaving when you know there's a next step. But I also want to cite, I really thought, I could never remember her name, Jean Milliken Bonds, was amazing. And you know, you and I have worked hard to kind of crack the bank code, and it didn't work out very well for us initially, but we're not giving up. But she really came up with some great ideas in terms of that community relations person. I think we should all take advantage of that. And they are willing to come, it seems, to your area and do the speed dating kind of thing, concept. So, you know, shame on us if we don't take her up on that.
Thanks, Wendy. That's excellent. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Wendy. One of the promises, first off, we're going to get all the slideshows, all the notes out to everybody. Secondly, we're also going to send you the contact information we promised Barry and Jeannie, and after their conversation yesterday. We'll get you the URLs. We'll send you all the web addresses for the information on the regional contacts for all three regulatory agencies, OCC, Federal Reserve, and FDIC. Makes sense? It's a great reminder, Wendy. Thank you. Some other thoughts? Ann.
This has been a terrific group to collaborate with, and the contacts that have been reached out around the country through the people who are here are important. But for this initiative to truly take off, and I appreciate the comments of the communications folks, it needs a ramped up effort, whether it's with a PR firm that will do pro bono or do other things, who really know the education community, know the banking community, can get the kinds of stories in the publications and really take it to that next level. And then just as an aside, we need to find a way to energize and engage a younger generation of superintendents or school leaders or funders or other people, because this is a very powerful and passionate room of individuals, and many of us have been at this many, many years. There needs to be a passing of the torch to make some other people really committed.
That's really fabulous. And that actually speaks to a challenge, as Ann and I have talked about. One of the challenges of the professional associations that are here is that if you go into the rooms where a lot of the conferences are being held, a lot of the folks look like me from the back. Gray-haired white person, right? And so the issue you're raising is really important about diversity and reaching out and helping and enhancing the efforts of associations to reach out. I mean, there's a lot of exciting work that NEA, NSBA, AASA, and so on are already doing, and we need to accentuate that. That's a great insight. Please, thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that I noticed is that there's still a very strong, sense of this being more educational than economic, and I cringe by that, because I know that, you know, when you're talking about banks, they're concerned with their bottom line. No bones about it. They are. And so when you get into just educational discussions, you lose them, because they're going to look at what are the outcomes, what are your objectives, what can we look at as success factors, and what is going to primarily or essentially bring in funding, you know, whether it be new customers that want to come to our bank because they're so used to our bank, and or at least new pathways into the community for them to establish banking institutions or something like that, because they know there's going to be funding there. So I just want to make sure that we consider or include more banking representatives that can help to bridge the gap between education, the digital equity part of education, to the economical inclusion part that banking institutions are considering. And one of the things that I would like to throw out there is entrepreneurship. So when you consider digital equity or helping people with digital literacy, considering how you can help those people to use that to reach entrepreneurial goals can then at least help you to have a dialogue with banks about, because now you're talking about loans, You're talking about being able to what they do with their grant money, how they start to do financial, financial literacy, financial inclusion, planning, those type of things, because, and you're increasing the ability for entrepreneurship to come out of those communities. So, thank you.
And you're bringing to mind a couple. I'll be just one quick comment, if I may, that what I realized is three things from your insight. First is that was a great insight for just all of us to hear and keep in mind for the whole community. Secondly is that in the details that we didn't have time to report out from the work groups, there may have been some level of detail about those concerns around addressing economic inclusion, not just educational and equity and digital equity. And thirdly, we really need to make sure that in the notes that we harvest from each of the work groups, that we do justice to your insights about these concerns, deeper than the 2-minute synopses that you produce. But thank you for that reminder. And Art? I'm sorry, Art? Sorry, Jesse.
Hey, he looks just like me. So I come at this from about, 9 years of experience, and I have 29 years of dealing with technology and technology financing. I'm not a computer coder, and I understand I work with banks all the time, and you're exactly right. But, I think we need to look at another facet of this, and that is how our society is being digitized. And I can give you a couple of publications and people that write on this. One is a guy by the name of Jeremy Ripken, who writes, his latest publication is Zero Marginal Cost. And he talks a lot about, where technology has taken us and how, this whole thing of if you can get it into a digital platform, it doubles, and that doubling effect goes on for decades in some situations. He talks about all that, and it expands. He's expansive in terms of, what that means and what industries and how society is responding to it and how job training has to keep, race to keep up with it and all that kind of stuff. So I would say, look at Jeremy Ripken. Also, a person, one of the co-partners of Singular University. I'm sure you've heard of Singular University. A guy by the name of Salem Ishmael. He has a book. It's called Exponential Organizations. I would say read that and get a sense of what he's saying in that book. And I think that'll help expand, our thinking in terms of, the broader society, and not just education, not just banking, not just CRA, but the broader society of where all this stuff is really going. And then look at the makerspace movement, what's happening in the makerspace, the whole 3D printing possibilities and so forth, and how that's and that's all part of Jeremy Ripken's analysis as well. So those are kind of my thoughts on this. Okay, Zero Marginal Costs, that's Jeremy Ripken, and Exponential Organizations by Salem Ishmael. He and Bowles and a whole number of folks started this. It's a virtual university. It's not really a brick and mortar hard and fast place, but it's to train Silicon Valley and high tech people out in California on what's.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, I don't want to talk. I'm just thinking.
No, I'm watching that.
This is going live, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we're good. Because the press conference started 3 minutes, so we're good. Yeah. Thank you. Other comments, insights, concerns? That was great. Well, let's try to wrap this up in a minute. All right. So you've given our team at the National Collaborative a lot of wonderful, wonderful homework. So some promises for you are that we're going to be, again, with the recorders who are voluntold, with the recorders and reporters' help, we're going to synthesize and compile the notes from each of the work groups and the recommendations from those and look for cross-cutting themes. We'll send you out a draft of that for your comment to make sure this resembled the conversations you actually had. And then we'll finalize that. In addition to that, we'll send you all the slideshows for that you saw in the last day and a half, including the link to the homework gap video, which I think a lot of folks really found very moving. And then we will be proceeding with a whole variety of next steps to really honor your visions and aspirations and very generous-hearted interest in participating in helping frame next steps. So lots of work ahead of us, good work, really deeply satisfying work. And one of the things, and Wendy commented about, from last year to this year and this summit and last year, one of the things we really try to do with everything that, as we live and breathe, sort of we make that part of our DNA at NCDE, is that we're not interested in awareness-raising episodes and planning, exercises. We really try to move an agenda, and Anne, I think you could tell if we're lying or not. I mean, she's seen us go from these very painful meetings 4 and 5 years ago about, oh, someday you'll be able to access CRA and it's going to be a lovely world, and the birds will sing, but you can't take that puppy home yet. Isn't it a nice puppy? You can't take it home yet. What we're seeing now is that communities are taking the puppy home, and there are examples to share that have been developed, not just by ourselves and our partners, but National Digital Inclusion Alliance and State Ed Tech Directors Association and others who've been doing this work unassumingly. The public libraries around the country have been doing digital equity work at scale since the early 1990s. Around, you walk in, you want access to a computer, access to the internet, you want to learn how to use it. So there are a lot of folks in this space doing wonderful work. We want to point to each other. So we're going to be doing a lot of reaching out to other organizations as well. And we're at 12:15, so as promised, I promised Larry and John that we're going to pass the baton over. John?